Good evening, and congratulations, you've chosen boredom on purpose. Tonight, we're exploring one of history's most terrifying examples of how quickly your neighbors can decide you're better off dead. Welcome to the witch hunts that swept across Europe and colonial America, where being different smart or just plain unlucky could get you burned at the stake. Picture this: you're lying on a straw mattress in your one-room cottage somewhere in 17th century Europe. The smell of wood smoke and unwashed bodies fills the air while rats scurry across the dirt floor. Outside, you can hear the distant sound of church bells calling the faithful to morning prayers. It's just another day in your life as a peasant until it isn't. Because today someone has whispered your name to the wrong person, and by sunset, you'll be branded a servant of Satan himself. You probably won't survive this, but hey, at least you'll make history. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere around the world, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where these bedtime stories are landing. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to the sound of heavy boots on cobblestones. But this isn't unusual. The town watch makes their rounds every morning. What is unusual is how those footsteps stop directly outside your door. You sit up, brushing straw from your hair, and peer through the single small window that serves as your connection to the outside world. 3 men stand in your yard, and one of them is holding a piece of parchment. Your stomach drops. You recognize the tallest man, Heinrich, the local magistrate's assistant. The other 2 wear the dark robes of church officials. This combination of secular and religious authority never means anything good for people like you. Heinrich pounds on your wooden door with the butt of his staff, a sound that echoes through your tiny dwelling like thunder. "Open in the name of God and the Holy Church," he shouts. You stumble to the door, your bare feet cold against the packed earth floor. The moment you lift the wooden latch, Heinrich pushes past you, followed by the 2 clerics. One of them, a thin man with sharp features, immediately begins scanning your humble possessions with the intensity of a hawk searching for prey. You are accused of practicing maleficium, Heinrich announces, unrolling the parchment. The Latin word hangs in the air like a death sentence, because that's exactly what it is. Maleficium, harmful magic witchcraft, consorting with demons. The charges that have sent thousands to their deaths across Europe. The accusations tumble out in a rush of medieval bureaucracy. Your neighbor's cow died last week, and she swears you gave it the evil eye. The baker's wife claims you muttered strange words when she refused to sell you bread on credit. Most damning of all that argument you had with the village priest about tithing, apparently questioning why God needs your last copper coin, makes you a prime candidate for devil worship. You try to protest to explain that cows die of disease, that you were simply frustrated about your empty stomach, that asking questions about church finances is hardly satanic. But your words fall on deaf ears. The thin cleric has found your collection of dried herbs, the ones you use to treat your family's ailments, and he holds them up like evidence of your pact with darkness. "Witches' potions," he declares with satisfaction. What he's actually holding is chamomile for upset stomachs and willow bark for headaches, remedies your grandmother taught you. But in a world where medical knowledge is viewed with suspicion and women's wisdom is automatically suspect, your attempts at healing become proof of your corruption. Historians still argue whether the witch hunts were primarily driven by religious fervor, social tensions, or economic factors. But from your perspective, as the accused, the why matters less than the what happens next. You're dragged from your home in nothing but your nightclothes, while neighbors peek from behind shuttered windows. Some look sympathetic, others eager for entertainment, but none dare speak in your defense. The irony isn't lost on you yesterday. These same people sought your help when their children had fevers or their backs ached from field work. Today, that same knowledge condemns you as an enemy of Christ. Your dried herbs, your ability to ease pain, your understanding of which plants help and which harm all of it, now twisted into evidence of supernatural malice. As Heinrich binds your hands with rough rope, you catch sight of your accuser watching from across the village square. She's the woman whose cow died, and there's no mistaking the satisfaction in her eyes. You remember now the argument you had with her husband over the property line between your plots of land. Amazing how quickly a boundary dispute transforms into allegations of devil worship when the local authorities are looking for their next witch. The walk to the magistrate's building feels eternal, every step taking you further from your old life and closer to a fate you can barely comprehend. Children throw stones and rotten vegetables, while adults mutter prayers and make the sign of the cross. You've become something inhuman in their eyes, a creature to be feared and destroyed, rather than a person who was baking bread and mending clothes just hours ago. This is how it begins, not with dramatic thunder and lightning, but with the mundane cruelties of village life escalating into something monstrous. Inside the magistrate's building, you're shoved into a stone chamber that reeks of fear, sweat, and something else you can't quite identify until you realize it's the smell of burned flesh. The room is dimly lit by flickering candles, their shadows dancing across an array of metal instruments that look like they belong in a blacksmith's forge rather than a court of law. The magistrate himself is a portly man named Wilhelm, whose red face suggests he's more familiar with wine barrels than law books. But it's the figure beside him who makes your blood run cold, a tall, gaunt inquisitor dressed in black robes, his pale hands folded neatly over a leather-bound manual. This is Brother Matthias, and he's traveled here specifically to root out servants of Satan. Lucky you. Strip, Brother Matthias commands in a voice as cold as winter stone. You hesitate, and immediately 2 guards grab your arms, tearing away your simple clothes until you stand naked and shivering in the damp chamber. The humiliation is intentional. Stripping away your dignity is the first step in breaking your spirit. Brother Matthias circles you like a vulture examining every inch of your skin with a magnifying glass. He's searching for the devil's mark, any blemish, mole scar, or birthmark that could be interpreted as Satan's signature on your flesh. The medieval mind believes that when you make a pact with the devil, he brands you like livestock. A freckle on your shoulder becomes suspicious. That scar from when you fell as a child clearly demonic. The small mole near your collarbone that you've had since birth. Brother Matthias nods knowingly as he pricks it with a needle. It feels no pain, he announces to the room though you definitely felt the sharp stab. The devil's mark is numb to earthly sensation. This is the water test logic at its finest. If you scream, you're lying about not feeling pain, proving guilt. If you don't scream loud enough, you're clearly under demonic protection, also proving guilt. Either way, you're screwed. Next comes the swimming test, though, thankfully not in your case. Brother Matthias considers it too crude for his refined methods. The theory behind water testing was beautifully absurd since water was used in Christian baptism. It would reject the devil's servants. If you sank and drowned, congratulations, you were innocent. If you floated, you were obviously being buoyed up by evil forces and would be burned alive. It's the kind of lose-lose situation that would be hilarious if it weren't so deadly. But Brother Matthias has more sophisticated tools at his disposal. He gestures to a wooden contraption that looks like a chair designed by someone who really hates chairs. This is the Judas chair, named after the betrayer himself, though you suspect Judas would find this excessive. The seat is pyramid-shaped, designed to slowly impale you as your own weight forces you down onto the point. Confess your sins against God, Brother Matthias intones, and your suffering will be brief. You maintain your innocence, which Brother Matthias interprets as stubbornness, worthy of correction. The guards force you onto the chair, and you feel the sharp point pressing against your flesh. The pain is immediate and excruciating, but this is just the beginning of their collection. There's also the thumb screw, a device so simple it's almost elegant in its cruelty. Your thumbs are placed between metal plates, connected by screws, which are slowly tightened until the bones crack. The beauty of this device, from an inquisitor's perspective, is that it can be adjusted a little pressure for minor sins, crushing force for major heresies. Brother Matthias explains the process with the enthusiasm of a craftsman discussing his tools. The strappado involves hanging you by your wrists, with your arms twisted behind your back, occasionally dropping you part way to dislocate your shoulders. The rack stretches your body in opposite directions until joints pop and muscles tear. The Iron Maiden, though historians still argue whether this spiked coffin actually existed or was a later invention, represents the medieval imagination at its most creative. But perhaps the most insidious tool is the sleep deprivation. You're kept awake for days at a time, questioned repeatedly, while guards poke you with sharp sticks whenever you start to nod off. Your mind begins to fracture, reality blurs with hallucination, and eventually you'll confess to anything just to make it stop. The questioning itself is an art form designed to trap you at every turn. Brother Matthias pulls out his manual, the Malleus Maleficarum, or Hammer of Witches, written by Heinrich Kramer in 1487. This bestseller provides detailed instructions on identifying, prosecuting, and executing witches, complete with helpful tips on extracting confessions. "Do you know the Lord's Prayer?" he asks. This seems easy enough, and you begin reciting the familiar words. But Brother Matthias stops you halfway through, claiming you stumbled over a phrase. In his manual, it clearly states that witches cannot properly recite holy words because the devil prevents them. Your nervous stammering under torture becomes proof of satanic interference. "Have you ever cursed anyone?" he continues. "You think of the time you muttered angrily about your neighbor's barking dog keeping you awake. Everyone curses when they're frustrated. It's human nature. But Brother Matthias nods sagely as you admit to this universal experience, marking it down as evidence of your malevolent powers. The questions become increasingly absurd. Have you ever flown through the air? Have you attended Sabbaths where witches dance naked with demons? Have you had carnal relations with Satan himself? Each no is met with skepticism, each hesitation with triumphant note taking. The genius of the system is that it's completely unfalsifiable. Deny everything, and you're obviously lying. Admit to anything, and you've confessed to witchcraft. Show fear, and you're terrified of being exposed. Show calm, and you're clearly under demonic protection. It's a masterclass in circular reasoning that would impress modern conspiracy theorists. After hours of this psychological torture, combined with the physical agony of the various devices most people break, they confess, not because they're guilty, but because confession is the only path that might lead to a quicker death. Some even begin to believe their own forced confessions, their minds so fractured by pain and sleeplessness that fantasy becomes indistinguishable from memory. Brother Matthias seems almost disappointed when you finally crack sobbing out admissions to crimes you never committed, naming accomplices you've never met, describing Sabbaths that exist only in the fevered imagination of your torturers. But he dutifully records every word, adding your testimony to the growing pile of evidence that will justify the next round of arrests. The most chilling part. This is considered justice, sanctioned by both church and state, carried out by men who genuinely believe they're doing God's work by torturing innocent people into false confessions. Your confession extracted through methods that would make modern interrogators wince becomes part of a larger pattern spreading across the Atlantic to the New World. While you rot in your European dungeon, similar scenes are playing out in a small Massachusetts village called Salem, where the witch hunting playbook you've just experienced is being refined and exported to colonial America. It begins, as these things often do, with children behaving badly. 9-year-old Betty Paris and her 11-year-old cousin Abigail Williams start having what their Puritan community calls fits, screaming, throwing themselves on the ground, contorting their bodies into impossible positions, and claiming invisible hands are pinching and biting them. In your medieval European context, this would be Tuesday. But in the rigid, paranoid world of Puritan New England, it's the opening act of America's most famous witch trial. The local physician, William Griggs, examines the girls and finds nothing physically wrong. But rather than suggesting they might be seeking attention or playing elaborate pranks, because apparently that possibility never occurred to anyone, he delivers the diagnosis that will doom dozens. The evil hand is upon them. Within weeks, the hysteria spreads like wildfire through Salem Village. 12 girls in total begin exhibiting similar symptoms, writhing and shrieking during church services, interrupting sermons with accusations of spectral torture. These afflicted girls become the star witnesses in what will unfold as a masterclass in mass hysteria and judicial incompetence. The first 3 women accused are perfect examples of how witch hunts target society's most vulnerable members. Sarah Good is a homeless beggar who goes door to door asking for food and shelter, exactly the kind of person who makes middle-class Puritans uncomfortable. Sarah Osborne is an elderly woman who rarely attends church and has the audacity to be involved in a property dispute with her neighbors. And then there's Tituba, an enslaved woman from Barbados whose very existence as an outsider makes her an ideal scapegoat. When brought before the magistrates, Tituba initially denies the charges. But unlike her European counterparts, who might face the Judas chair or thumbscrews, she's subjected to relentless psychological pressure and the very real threat of being sold away from her family. Faced with these impossible choices, Tituba does something that changes the entire trajectory of the Salem trials. She confesses, but with a twist. Rather than simply admitting guilt and begging for mercy, Tituba spins an elaborate tale of devil worship that reads like a Puritan's worst nightmare come to life. She describes meeting with the devil, who appears sometimes as a man, sometimes as a dog or hog. She talks about flying through the air to attend witches' sabbaths, about signing the devil's book with her own blood, about conspiring with other witches to torment innocent children. But here's the brilliant part. She claims there are many more witches in Salem, creating a sense of urgent danger that demands immediate action. Her confession becomes the foundation for months of additional accusations as the authorities scramble to root out this supposed coven of devil worshippers hiding among the godly citizens of Massachusetts. The Salem magistrates, unlike their European counterparts, don't rely heavily on physical torture. Instead, they perfect the art of psychological manipulation and create an atmosphere where maintaining innocence becomes virtually impossible. They accept spectral evidence testimony about dreams, visions, and invisible attacks as legitimate proof of witchcraft. During the trials, the afflicted girls would writhe and scream whenever the accused looked at them, claiming the defendant's specter was tormenting them at that very moment. The accused would be ordered to touch the girls, and miraculously contact would break the spell and stop their fits. This touch test became a cornerstone of the proceedings, though it conveniently ignored the obvious explanation that the girls were performing for an audience. The trials also introduced the concept of pressing, not the European version involving crushing weights, but social and legal pressure designed to force confessions. Those who confessed were spared execution but faced imprisonment and social exile. Those who maintained their innocence were hanged. It's a system that rewards lies and punishes truth, creating a perverse incentive structure that would be familiar to anyone who's experienced modern plea bargaining. Historians still argue whether the Salem girls were genuinely delusional, suffering from ergot poisoning caused by contaminated grain, or simply caught up in a performance that spiraled beyond their control. What's certain is that adults in positions of authority took their accusations at face value, creating a feedback loop where increasingly dramatic symptoms were rewarded with increased attention and power. The geography of accusations reveals the underlying social tensions driving the hysteria. Salem Village was split between a traditional farming community and newer commercial interests tied to Salem town. Many of the accusers came from farming families, while many of the accused had connections to the merchant class. Property disputes, church conflicts, and economic anxieties all found expression through witchcraft allegations. Martha Corey, a respected church member, makes the fatal error of suggesting that the afflicted girls might be mistaken or lying. Her skepticism marks her as a target, and soon she's accused of sending her specter to torment the very girls she dared to question. It's a perfect example of how dissent becomes evidence of guilt in these systems. Giles Corey. Martha's husband initially supports the trials until his wife is accused. When he's arrested and refuses to enter a plea, knowing that a trial will result in conviction and the forfeiture of his property to the crown, the authorities resort to peine forte et dure, pressing him with stones until he agrees to plead. He dies under the weight, his last words reportedly being, "More weight," becoming one of the few people in Salem to die by actual pressing rather than hanging. The Salem trials perfect the European witch hunting model by making it more civilized, no obvious torture chambers or elaborate devices, just psychological pressure, social ostracism, and the ever-present threat of execution. It's witch hunting with a Puritan work ethic, efficient and systematic in its destruction of lives and communities. By the time the Salem trials end, 20 people are dead, 19 hanged, and 1 pressed to death. Over 150 people were imprisoned, and many more lived under the shadow of accusation. The aftermath reveals the hollow nature of the entire enterprise. Most of the afflicted girls eventually recant their testimony, and the colonial government declares the trials a mistake. But the damage is done, and the Salem model exports itself throughout colonial America, creating a template for how hysteria can be weaponized against unpopular individuals and minority groups. The witch trials become America's first great moral panic, setting a precedent for the kind of mass hysteria that will surface repeatedly throughout the nation's history. Back in your European cell, while Salem burns through its witch-hunting frenzy across the ocean, you're surrounded by the bizarre world of supposed supernatural evidence that has condemned you and countless others. The authorities don't just rely on confessions extracted through torture. They've created an entire pseudoscience of detecting witchcraft, complete with physical objects, tests, and proof that would make a modern forensics expert weep with laughter. Your captors are particularly excited about the witch bottle they discovered buried near your cottage. This glass container, filled with urine hairnail clippings and rusty pins, is presented as evidence of your malevolent magic. What they don't understand or choose to ignore is that witch bottles were actually protective devices created by people trying to defend themselves against supposed curses. Your grandmother made this one years ago during a particularly harsh winter when livestock were dying, hoping to ward off evil influences. But in the twisted logic of witch hunters, protection from witchcraft becomes evidence of practicing witchcraft. The bottle joins a growing collection of exhibits that reads like a catalog of medieval misunderstanding. That oddly shaped root you keep for good luck, obviously a mandrake used in devil worship. Never mind that it's actually just a parsnip that grew around a stone. The collection of animal bones you use for divination, proof of necromancy, despite the fact that reading bones for weather prediction is about as supernatural as watching clouds to forecast rain. Brother Matthias takes particular interest in your scrying mirror, a piece of polished black stone you inherited from your mother. He claims witches use such devices to communicate with demons, conjure visions of the future, and spy on their enemies. The reality is far more mundane. You sometimes gaze into its dark surface while thinking through problems the way some people stare at windows or into fires. But contemplation becomes divination in the eyes of your accusers. The authorities have also collected testimony about your familiar spirits, the supernatural entities that supposedly assist witches in their evil work. Your black cat Midnight is exhibit number 1. Never mind that she's an excellent mouser who keeps your grain stores free of vermin. In witch hunting logic, black cats are automatically demonic companions. The fact that she follows you around and seems to understand your moods, normal behavior for any pet, becomes proof of supernatural communication. Even more ridiculous is the testimony about your imp, a small creature witnesses claim to have seen near your home. What they actually saw was a hedgehog that lives under your woodpile, but in a world where anything unusual becomes evidence of devil worship, a perfectly ordinary woodland animal transforms into a demonic helper. One neighbor swears she saw you feeding it milk from a small bowl, which is true. You enjoy watching the little creature and occasionally share food scraps. But kindness to animals becomes proof of an unholy pact. The examination of your body reveals several more devil's marks that Brother Matthias catalogs with scientific precision. A small birthmark on your thigh becomes a witch's teat, where your familiar spirits supposedly nurse. The fact that it's been there since birth is irrelevant in witch hunting mythology. Satan marks his servants from the cradle. A tiny mole near your hairline is identified as another supernatural brand, and when pricked with a needle, it allegedly doesn't bleed properly, proving its demonic nature. Your accusers have also presented the court with a collection of poppets, crude dolls made from scraps of cloth and straw that were found in your home. These are supposedly voodoo dolls used to curse your enemies through sympathetic magic. The truth is that you made them as toys for the village children during long winter evenings. But children's playthings become instruments of malevolent sorcery in the fevered imagination of witch hunters. Perhaps the most absurd piece of evidence is the Devil's Book they claim to have found among your possessions. This leather-bound volume contains what Brother Matthias describes as blasphemous writings and demonic symbols. What it actually contains are herbal remedies, weather observations, and household accounts written in your grandmother's shaky handwriting. But literacy itself is suspicious among peasant women, and any book not explicitly approved by the church becomes a grimoire of dark magic. The investigators have even found supernatural significance in your gardening practices. The fact that your vegetables grow better than your neighbor's crops is presented as evidence of demonic assistance. Never mind your careful composting, strategic planting, and years of experience, success itself becomes proof of wrongdoing. Your knowledge of which plants grow well together is reinterpreted as spellcasting, and your ability to predict weather patterns by observing natural signs becomes prophecy powered by evil forces. Historians still argue whether the people presenting this evidence genuinely believed in its supernatural significance or were simply going through the motions of a legal system designed to produce convictions regardless of actual guilt. What's certain is that the accumulation of proof creates an overwhelming case against you, even though every single piece of evidence has a perfectly rational explanation. The courtroom fills with additional witnesses who contribute their own interpretations of perfectly normal events. The time you successfully treated a child's fever with willow bark tea becomes testimony about your power to both cause and cure diseases at will. Your argument with the blacksmith about payment for horseshoe repair is reframed as you cursing his work, explaining why his forge fire went out the next day. Even the fact that you sometimes talk to yourself while working in the garden, a habit most people share, becomes evidence of conversing with invisible demons. The investigators have also collected samples of mysterious substances found near your home. What appears to be grave dirt is actually just particularly rich soil from your compost pile, but it's presented as evidence that you've been robbing graves for necromantic purposes. A pouch of white powder, actually salt for preserving meat, is identified as ground bones from unbaptized infants, supposedly used in your most potent spells. Your few remaining defenders find their testimony twisted into additional evidence against you. When your friend Mary testifies that you've always been a good Christian who helps her neighbors, the prosecutors argue that this proves your skill at deception. Obviously, the most dangerous witches are those who appear virtuous while secretly serving Satan. When the village priest admits you've been regular in church attendance, Brother Matthias suggests this demonstrates your cunning in maintaining a false front while plotting against the faithful. The sheer volume of evidence creates its own momentum as each accusation generates new investigations that uncover additional proof. Your herb garden becomes a witch's laboratory, your pet becomes a demon, your literacy becomes sorcery, and your kindness becomes manipulation. In this upside-down world, every positive quality you possess is reinterpreted as evidence of your guilt, creating a narrative where innocence itself becomes impossible to prove. While you languish in chains, surviving on moldy bread and brackish water, the machinery of witch hunting hums along above your head with the efficiency of a well-oiled business. Because that's exactly what it is, a thriving industry that employs thousands of people across Europe and generates enormous profits for those smart enough to position themselves at the top of the feeding chain. Brother Matthias isn't just a religious zealot driven by divine mission. He's a franchise owner in the most successful fear-based enterprise of the medieval period. Professional witch hunters like him travel from town to town, offering their specialized services to local authorities, eager to demonstrate their commitment to fighting evil. For a reasonable fee plus expenses, naturally they'll identify the devil worshippers hiding in your community and extract confessions that will satisfy both God and the paying customers. The economics are beautifully simple. Brother Matthias charges the local magistrate 50 silver pieces for his initial consultation, plus daily fees for extended investigations. The magistrate in turn funds these expenses by confiscating property from accused witches, your cottage, your small plot of land, your few livestock, even your cooking pots become assets in the fight against Satan. It's a system where fighting evil pays extremely well, creating powerful incentives to find evil everywhere you look. The church hierarchy above Brother Matthias takes their cut through various mechanisms designed to appear holy while maximizing profit. Special masses must be said for the souls of executed witches for a fee, of course. Holy water used in examinations requires blessing by senior clergy who charge for their sacred time. Even the wooden stakes used for burning require consecration, turning lumber into a premium religious product. Cardinal Alessandro, the regional church authority, has built his entire career on the witch hunting boom. His treatise on the identification of demonic servants has become required reading for inquisitors across Europe, generating substantial royalties while establishing him as the continent's leading expert on supernatural threats. He's transformed scholarly discussion of witchcraft into a publishing empire, complete with workshops, seminars, and certification programs for aspiring witch hunters. The beauty of the system is that it's self-perpetuating. Every confession extracted through torture provides names of additional conspirators, creating an ever-expanding network of investigations. Your forced testimony naming neighbors as fellow witches doesn't just condemn them, it creates new revenue streams for the entire apparatus. Each accusation generates fees for investigation, charges for imprisonment costs, for trial proceedings, and profits from property confiscation. Local nobles have discovered that witch hunting offers an elegant solution to multiple problems simultaneously. Those troublesome peasants demanding better working conditions, clearly corrupted by demonic influence. That merchant who's been challenging traditional trade monopolies, obviously in league with Satan. That widow whose property you've been eyeing for expansion, definitely a practitioner of maleficium. Witch hunting becomes a convenient tool for eliminating political opposition while appearing to serve God. Duke Heinrich has perfected this approach, using witchcraft accusations to consolidate power and eliminate rivals. His court wizard, officially titled Spiritual Advisor, maintains detailed files on potential enemies, documenting their suspicious behaviors, unusual friendships, and questionable religious practices. When political necessity demands someone's removal, these files provide ready-made evidence for witch trials. The Duke presents himself as a defender of Christian virtue, while systematically destroying anyone who threatens his authority. The legal system has adapted to support this profitable enterprise through procedural innovations that guarantee convictions while maintaining the appearance of justice. Judges receive bonuses for successful prosecutions, creating financial incentives to find defendants guilty. Court clerks charge fees for recording testimony, documenting evidence, and filing appeals, with rates carefully calibrated to make defense expensive while keeping prosecution affordable. Even the executioners have become entrepreneurs, selling pieces of rope and wood from witch burnings as holy relics that protect against evil influence. Historians still argue whether these officials genuinely believed in the supernatural threats they claimed to be fighting, but the financial records tell a clear story. Brother Matthias owns 3 houses, maintains a staff of assistants, and travels with an entourage that would make minor nobility envious. Cardinal Alessandro has funded construction of an entire monastery through his witch-hunting activities. Duke Heinrich's treasury has doubled since he began systematic persecution of supposed devil worshippers. The medical establishment has found ways to profit from the hysteria as well. Physicians charge premium rates for examining accused witches, identifying devil's marks, and testifying about supernatural influence on human behavior. They've developed an entire specialty around demonic medicine, creating treatments for possession protective amulets against curses and diagnostic procedures for identifying spiritual corruption. Dr. Wilhelm has written extensively about the physical symptoms of witchcraft, establishing himself as an expert witness whose testimony commands high fees in court proceedings. Even ordinary citizens have learned to monetize the witch-hunting boom. Professional witnesses travel between trials, offering testimony about supernatural events they claim to have observed. Their stories become increasingly elaborate and dramatic as they compete for attention and payment from prosecutors. Some specialize in particular types of evidence, so spectral sightings, familiar spirits, demonic marks, developing reputations that command premium rates for their testimony. The torture specialists represent perhaps the most cynical aspect of the entire enterprise. Master Heinrich, who designed and operates the devices in your dungeon, charges by the hour for his services while maintaining careful records of which techniques produce the fastest confessions. He's published a technical manual on efficient information extraction from demonic servants, complete with detailed illustrations and cost-benefit analyses of different approaches. His workshop trains apprentices in the fine art of inflicting maximum pain while keeping subjects alive long enough to provide useful testimony. The system has become so profitable that entire regions now depend economically on witch hunting. The town of Würzburg employs over 200 people directly in witch-related activities, from investigators and torturers to clerks and executioners. Secondary industries have emerged to support these primary functions: specialized blacksmiths who make shackles and torture devices, carpenters who build stakes, and scaffolds merchants who supply the holy water and blessed oils required for examinations. What makes this particularly insidious is how the profit motive disguises itself as religious duty. Brother Matthias genuinely believes he's saving souls while building his personal fortune. Cardinal Alessandro sees no contradiction between serving God and accumulating wealth through witch hunting. Duke Heinrich considers his political machinations to be acts of Christian leadership. They've created a system where doing evil pays so well that it becomes indistinguishable from doing good, at least in their own minds. The result is an industry that has every incentive to find witches everywhere, regardless of actual evidence, because finding witches is what pays the bills. Your innocence is irrelevant to people whose livelihoods depend on your guilt. The stone walls of your cell weep with condensation as winter tightens its grip on the fortress where you await your final dawn. 3 months have passed since that morning when Heinrich's boots stopped outside your door. 3 months of torture, false confessions, and the slow dissolution of everything you once believed about justice and human decency. Tomorrow, when the sun rises over the town square, you'll be dragged to a wooden stake where crowds will gather to watch you burn alive for crimes that exist only in the fevered imaginations of your persecutors. You lie on the straw that serves as your bed, listening to the rats scurrying through the darkness, and marvel at how quickly a normal life can transform into this nightmare. The woman who worried about winter provisions and mended clothes by candlelight has become a condemned witch in the eyes of people who once sought her help with their ailments. The journey from respected neighbor to devil's servant took exactly 93 days, though you've lost count of how many times you've been questioned, tortured, and forced to sign confessions written in languages you can't read. The irony tastes bitter as week old water. Every single charge against you stems from qualities that should be virtues in any reasonable society. Your knowledge of herbal medicine passed down through generations of women who understood which plants heal and which harm became evidence of supernatural power. Your literacy, painstakingly acquired through years of practice, transformed into proof of demonic education. Your independence as a woman who could support herself without male protection marked you as unnatural and therefore dangerous. Even your acts of kindness have been weaponized against you. The time you helped deliver your neighbor's baby during a difficult birth is now cited as evidence of your power over life and death. Your habit of sharing food with hungry children proves your skill at deception. Obviously, you were grooming them for future corruption. The medicines you brewed to treat fevers and stomach ailments demonstrate your ability to both cause and cure diseases, marking you as someone who manipulates illness for personal gain. Brother Matthias visited your cell this evening for what he calls a final opportunity for redemption. He's genuinely puzzled by your continued protestations of innocence, having extracted multiple confessions through methods that rarely fail to produce compliance. In his worldview, your refusal to accept guilt, even in the face of certain death, proves the depth of your demonic possession. A truly repentant witch would embrace execution as liberation from Satan's influence, but your persistent claims of innocence mark you as irredeemably corrupted. The conversation reveals the circular logic that has trapped you and thousands of others in this machinery of death. If you confess, you're guilty and must die. If you maintain innocence, you're lying and must die. Show fear, and you're terrified of divine judgment. Show calm, and you're protected by evil forces. Cry during torture, and you're trying to gain sympathy through deception. Remain stoic, and you're demonstrating unnatural resistance to pain. Every human response becomes evidence of guilt in a system designed to justify predetermined conclusions. You think about the cascade of accusations that followed your forced confession, how your tortured testimony created a domino effect of arrests and trials throughout the region. The names you provided under duress, chosen randomly from people you barely knew, have led to dozens of additional prosecutions. Your neighbor's wife, accused because you mentioned her during one particularly brutal session, confessed last week and implicated 6 more people before her execution. The blacksmith's daughter, named in desperation when they threatened to crush your hands, hanged herself in her cell rather than face trial. The village you once called home has become a wasteland of suspicion and fear, where neighbors denounce neighbors and families turn against their own members to avoid accusations. Children have been trained to report any unusual behavior to authorities, creating a generation of informants who see supernatural threats in every shadow. The social fabric that once bound your community together has been shredded by the systematic cultivation of paranoia and mistrust. Tomorrow's execution will be a festival of righteous hatred, complete with food vendors, traveling musicians, and special church services celebrating the triumph of good over evil. Families will bring their children to witness your death, using your burning as a moral lesson about the wages of sin. The authorities will deliver speeches about the importance of remaining vigilant against Satan's servants, while Brother Matthias will offer prayers for your corrupted soul and warnings about the ongoing supernatural threat. The timing isn't coincidental. Your execution is scheduled for market day, ensuring maximum attendance and reinforcing the political message that resistance to authority, whether religious, social, or economic, will be met with the most extreme consequences. The smoke from your burning body will rise above the town square like a signal fire, warning other potential dissidents about the cost of challenging the established order. Historians still argue whether the witch hunts were primarily about religious fervor, social control, or economic exploitation. But from your perspective on this final night, the distinction seems academic. What matters is that a system designed to protect society from supernatural threats has become the very evil it claims to fight, destroying innocent lives while enriching and empowering those who profit from manufactured fear. As dawn approaches, you find yourself thinking not about the pain to come, but about the simple pleasures that defined your previous existence. The satisfaction of a well tended garden, the warmth of bread fresh from the oven, the comfort of familiar routines that gave structure and meaning to ordinary days. These small joys, available to everyone, regardless of station or wealth, somehow threaten the people who have condemned you to death. The guards are stirring in the corridor outside your cell, preparing for the day's festivities. Brother Matthias will arrive soon with his final prayers and last-minute opportunities for confession. The crowds are probably already gathering in the square, eager for the entertainment that comes with watching another witch burn. And you lie here in the darkness, an innocent woman about to die for crimes she never committed, a victim of humanity's infinite capacity for turning virtue into vice and transforming justice into persecution. Your story ends tomorrow, but the machinery that created this tragedy will continue its work, feeding on fear and ignorance, while those who operate it grow rich and powerful. The witch hunts won't end with your death. They'll simply find new victims, new accusations, new reasons to transform neighbors into enemies and communities into hunting grounds for manufactured monsters. In these final hours before dawn, you close your eyes and try to remember what it felt like to live without fear, to trust your neighbors, to believe that justice and truth might actually matter in a world where power ultimately decides who lives and who dies. The flames are already being prepared in the square outside, and your long night is almost over. The morning light filters weakly through the narrow window of your cell as you hear the guards approaching for the final time. Your body aches from months of confinement and torture, but your mind has found a strange peace in accepting what cannot be changed. The accusations that seemed so absurd when they first fell from Heinrich's lips have become the official truth, recorded in documents that will outlive everyone in this sordid tale. Outside, you can hear the sounds of a festival, preparing vendors calling their wares, children laughing, the creak of wooden platforms being assembled for the best viewing positions. Your death has become entertainment, a social event that brings the community together in shared righteousness. The irony would be amusing if it weren't so tragic. People who claim to serve a God of love and forgiveness gathering to celebrate the burning of an innocent woman. You think of other women like you across Europe and the colonies facing similar dawns in similar cells, condemned by similar systems of manufactured justice. Some will confess at the last moment, hoping for mercy that rarely comes. Others will maintain their innocence, even as the flames rise around them. All will die for the crime of being different, vulnerable, or simply unlucky enough to attract the wrong kind of attention in a world that profits from fear. The heavy door creaks open, and Brother Matthias enters with his final prayers, followed by guards who seem almost apologetic as they bind your hands. The walk to the square feels like moving through a dream. Faces blur together in the crowd, voices merge into an indistinct roar of anticipation and judgment. The stake rises before you like a wooden monument to human cruelty, surrounded by carefully arranged kindling that someone has blessed with holy water. As they tie you to the rough wood, you look out over the sea of faces, neighbors who once sought your help, children whose fevers you broke with gentle herbs, officials who know perfectly well that you've committed no crime beyond existing in a world that needs scapegoats for its fears and failures. Some watch with satisfaction, others with curiosity, a few with what might be regret or shame. The flames catch quickly in the dry wood, rising around you like bright flowers blooming in reverse. Through the smoke and heat, through the pain that finally comes, you hold on to one last truth that no amount of torture could extract you, lived an honest life, helped when you could, and harmed no one. In a world gone mad with manufactured terror, that quiet dignity might be the only real victory available. The smoke rises high above the town square, carrying with it the dreams and memories of another innocent life consumed by humanity's endless appetite for finding monsters in the mirror. But even as your story ends in fire and ash somewhere else, a child is being born who will grow up to question these systems, to challenge these authorities, to slowly build a world where such tragedies become impossible. The witch hunts will end eventually, not through divine intervention, but through human courage, people brave enough to stand up and say that fear makes terrible law, that difference isn't dangerous, and that the real evil lies not in harmless women with herb gardens, but in systems that profit from manufacturing terror out of thin air. Rest now in the quiet darkness, where the flames cannot reach and the accusations finally fall silent. Your long nightmare is over, and perhaps in some small way, your suffering will help ensure that future generations inherit a world slightly less willing to burn its daughters for the crime of being themselves.